Inside the Sullivans' pub, the soft notes of jazz music floated through the air. Derek, a hard-working businessman with a natural air of quiet confidence, was seated at the bar, his usual spot on Friday nights. He leaned back on his stool, casually engaged in light-hearted banter with Luis, the bartender, who was busy drying glasses with a spotless white towel. Derek's laughter mingled with the clinking of glassware as they shared a joke about the local football team's latest loss. "Can't believe they dropped the ball again," Derek chuckled, shaking his head. Luis grinned. "They've got talent but no luck. Sounds a bit like your golf game, Derek." Derek feigned indignation, raising his glass of amber ale and mock toast. "Here's to being consistently mediocre." Across the room, in a quiet corner bathed in shadows, Helen sat with Derek's brother, Harry. Helen's laughter rang out, a soft, melodious sound that seemed to complement the jazz, while Harry leaned in closer, talking animatedly. The two appeared engrossed in a private conversation, occasionally stealing glances at Derek as if to make sure he remained at ease. Derek noticed Helen and Harry in their corner, but thought nothing of it. They had always shared a bond, united by their mutual love for him. He trusted them implicitly, his faith in their honesty unwavering. Helen caught Derek's gaze and flashed him a reassuring smile, her eyes twinkling under the dim lights. It was a familiar gesture that spoke volumes of their shared history. Derek found himself drifting back to their wedding day, the memory still vivid in his mind. The vows they exchanged, the promises of a future built on love and trust. Helen had been his anchor, his partner through the ups and downs of life. The memory shifted to include Harry, who had stood by Derek's side as his best man. They had grown up together, facing life's challenges as a team. Harry had always been his confidant, the brother who knew him better than anyone else. "You're lucky, you know," Luis remarked, interrupting Derek's thoughts. "Having such a close family." Derek nodded, swirling his drink thoughtfully. "Yeah, I'm grateful every day for Helen and Harry. They're my rock." As the evening wore on, the bar slowly filled with the familiar faces of friends and neighbors, creating a tapestry of voices and laughter. Derek noticed a few couples huddled close, their conversations drowned out by the rising chatter. He glanced back at Helen and Harry, watching as they laughed together over some shared joke. Derek felt a warmth spread through his chest, a profound contentment that came from knowing he was surrounded by people who cared for him deeply. Helen leaned across the table, her voice carrying just enough for Derek to catch snippets. "It's all about timing, right?" she said with a playful wink, nudging Harry with her elbow. Harry chuckled in response, nodding in agreement. "You've got that right. Timing is everything." Derek smiled, interpreting their exchange as part of some inside joke. As the night deepened, the jazz music gave way to a more upbeat tempo, energizing the crowd. Helen and Harry stood, waving Derek over to join them for a dance, but he declined with a wave, preferring to enjoy his ale and the lively atmosphere from his perch at the bar. "Suit yourself," Helen called out, her smile never wavering as she and Harry moved to the rhythm of the music. Derek watched them dance, his heart swelling with pride and affection for the two most important people in his life. He finished his drink, a satisfied sigh escaping his lips as he set the glass down. The evening had been perfect, a reminder of the simple joys that defined his life. Derek felt a deep sense of gratitude for the stability and happiness he had found in his marriage and the steadfast bond he shared with his brother. They came back after dancing. As Derek took another sip of his drink, he glanced toward the corner table where Helen and Harry sat. Their heads were close together, a bubble of privacy in the crowded room. Derek smiled to himself, feeling lucky to have such a tight-knit family. His attention drifted back to the television behind the bar, where highlights from the day's sports games flashed across the screen. But then, a snippet of Helen's voice cut through the air, drawing Derek's attention back to the corner. At first, he didn't quite catch the words, but something in her tone seemed off, sharper, more intense. Derek leaned back slightly, his curiosity piqued. "So, once he signs the business and puts the house in my name, we'll run away together. That loser can't find us." Helen's voice carried clearly over the murmur of the pub. Derek froze, his glass hovering inches from his lips. He blinked, convinced he must have misheard. His heart pounded in his chest, a rhythmic thudding that seemed to echo the rising crescendo of disbelief in his mind. Harry's voice followed, equally conspiring. Just a few more weeks of playing the loving, faithful wife. Derek's grip tightened around the glass, the cool condensation slipping through his fingers as a torrent of emotions crashed over him. Disbelief, anger, and a deep sense of betrayal twisted in his gut, turning his stomach. The room felt suddenly smaller, closing in around him as the truth seeped into every corner of his consciousness. Could it be true? The thought raced through Derek's mind, accompanied by a montage of moments he might have missed or chosen to ignore. The late nights Helen claimed she was working, the unexplained absences, and the secretive whispers between her and Harry that he had dismissed as sibling-like camaraderie. His hands trembled slightly as he set the glass down on the bar with a thud, his mind struggling to process what he had just heard. He turned his gaze back to Helen and Harry, their faces animated with deceitful joy. The sight felt like a punch to the gut, knocking the wind out of him. Derek's mind raced, flipping through memories like pages in a book. He recalled the tenderness of their wedding day, the shared dreams and promises that now felt like cruel jokes. He had trusted Helen implicitly, and Harry, his own brother, had been his closest ally. "Hey, Derek, you okay?" Louis's voice cut through Derek's spiraling thoughts, the bartender eyeing him with concern. Derek forced a smile, though it felt tight and unnatural. "Yeah, just lost in thought," he managed to say, his voice steadier than he felt. Inwardly, his thoughts were anything but calm. How could he have been so blind? The realization that his wife and brother had been plotting behind his back made his skin crawl. The room felt colder, and the once inviting ambience of the pub turned sour, a mockery of the warmth he had felt just moments before. Derek sat at the bar, his heart pounding in his chest like a relentless drum. He could feel the heat rising in his face as anger surged through him, burning away the shock and disbelief that had held him captive moments ago. He couldn't sit there any longer, couldn't pretend he hadn't just heard the betrayal that had shattered his world. The thought of Helen and Harry plotting behind his back, planning to leave him with nothing, was more than he could bear. He needed to face them, to make them see the pain they had caused. Summoning his courage, Derek stood up, his decision made. His hands trembled slightly as he smoothed his shirt, trying to maintain an air of calm, though inside he felt anything but. He took a deep breath and crossed the room, each step deliberate and measured. The distance between the bar and their table seemed to stretch and contract, a surreal tunnel of emotion that he moved through with grim determination. His eyes were locked on Helen and Harry, who were still engrossed in their deceitful conversation, oblivious to the storm headed their way. As Derek approached, the chatter of the pub began to die down, patrons sensing the tension in the air. Conversations faded to murmurs, and eyes turned to watch, curiosity piqued by the shift in atmosphere. The low hum of jazz music seemed to underscore the drama unfolding in their midst. When Derek reached their table, he stopped and raised his glass, his voice ringing with bitter clarity. "Cheers to your freedom. Divorce papers on the way. Now you're not allowed in my house. You both assholes." Helen's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock. Her jaw dropped as she struggled to comprehend the situation, words failing her for the first time. Her face turned pale, her carefully constructed facade crumbling under the weight of Derek's accusation. "What, Derek? No, you don't understand," Helen stammered, reaching for his hand, desperation in her eyes. Derek pulled his hand back, his anger lending him strength. "Oh, I think I understand perfectly," he said, his voice steady but laced with hurt. "I heard everything, Helen. Everything." Harry, sitting across from Helen, tried to intervene, his expression a mix of guilt and panic. "Derek, listen. It's not what you think." Derek silenced him with a glare, his eyes cold and unforgiving. "Not another word, Harry. You were my brother. How could you?" The tension in the pub was palpable, a thick fog of disbelief and shock that hung over the patrons. All eyes were on the unfolding confrontation, the bar's usual camaraderie replaced by a heavy silence as everyone waited to see what would happen next. Helen, tears welling up in her eyes, attempted to defend herself. Derek, please, let me explain. It's not what it seems, she pleaded, her voice breaking. We were just talking. Derek's anger flared, his voice rising. Talking? About stealing everything I've worked for? About running away together? How long has this been going on, Helen? Helen shook her head, tears spilling over as she tried to find the right words. Derek, please, I didn't mean for it to happen this way. I was just what? Derek interrupted, his heart aching even as he spoke. Just planning to leave me with nothing? To betray everything we built together? Harry shifted uncomfortably, guilt etched on his face. Derek, I never wanted to hurt you. It just happened. Derek laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. It just happened? That's your excuse? You're both pathetic. Helen reached for him again, her voice trembling. Please, Derek, I love you. I didn't want to hurt you. Love? Derek's voice cracked with emotion. You call this love? You and Harry plotting behind my back? The patrons around them watched in stunned silence, the weight of Derek's words hanging heavy in the air. Some exchanged glances, sympathy etched on their faces, while others watched with morbid curiosity. The pub felt like a courtroom, the verdict hanging in the balance as Derek stood before his betrayers. He could feel the eyes of the crowd on him, their silent support bolstering his resolve. He took a deep breath, the weight of his decision settling over him like a shroud. It's over, Helen. Whatever we had, whatever we were, it's done. I'll send the divorce papers tomorrow, and I want you out of the house by the end of the week. His voice was firm, his resolve unyielding. With that, Derek turned away, leaving Helen and Harry in stunned silence. The pub gradually resumed its normal rhythm, the noise and chatter returning as Derek walked back to the bar. But for Derek, nothing would ever be the same again. The cool night air hit Derek's face as he stepped out of Sullivan's pub, a welcome relief from the stifling tension inside. The stars twinkled above, indifferent to the turmoil swirling within him. Derek paused on the sidewalk, taking a deep breath as he tried to calm the storm of emotions that raged inside. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and plans, each vying for attention. He knew he had to act swiftly and decisively to protect himself and his future. Helen and Harry's betrayal had been a sucker punch, but Derek was determined not to let it destroy him. He had too much at stake, his business, his home, and the life he had built from the ground up. Derek walked slowly down the street. He pulled out his phone and began typing notes to himself, organizing his thoughts into a plan of action. The first thing on his list was to contact a lawyer first thing in the morning to initiate divorce proceedings. He knew a good attorney who specialized in family law, someone who could help him navigate the legal maze that lay ahead. First thing tomorrow, Derek muttered to himself, his resolve hardening with each step. I'll make sure Helen and Harry get nothing. His mind shifted to the practicalities of protecting his assets. Derek knew he needed to secure his business, ensuring it remained out of Helen's reach. He had built the company from scratch, investing years of sweat and dedication. The thought of losing it to Helen's scheming was unbearable. As Derek walked, memories of happier times flitted through his mind like ghosts. He recalled the early days with Helen, the excitement of their budding romance, and the dreams they had shared. The memory of their wedding day played vividly in his mind. The vows, the laughter, the promises made in earnest. But those memories clashed violently with the present reality. The betrayal felt like a knife twisting in his gut, turning those cherished moments into painful reminders of what he had lost. Yet, beneath the hurt, Derek felt a growing determination to move forward, fueled by a desire for justice and a need to reclaim his life. He reached a small park at the end of the street, the moonlight casting long shadows across the path. Derek found a bench and sat down, allowing himself a moment to breathe and think. He knew this was just the beginning of a long, difficult journey, but he was ready to face it head-on. His phone buzzed in his pocket, interrupting his thoughts. It was a message from Helen. Reluctantly, Derek opened it, bracing himself for whatever she had to say. Derek, please, can we talk? I know you're hurt, but we need to discuss this. I never wanted it to end this way. He stared at the message, anger flaring once more. How dare she try to explain away her betrayal with a simple text? The audacity of it made his blood boil. He considered ignoring her, but he knew they would have to communicate eventually, if only to finalize the divorce. There's nothing to discuss, Helen. We'll handle this through our lawyers. I don't want to see you or Harry again. Derek typed back, his fingers tapping rapidly across the screen. He hit send and put the phone back in his pocket, feeling a sense of relief at having set a boundary. The decision felt right, a necessary step in reclaiming his life from the wreckage Helen and Harry had left behind. As he sat in the quiet park, Derek allowed himself to imagine what life might look like after the dust settled. He pictured himself focusing on his business, pouring his energy into new projects, and perhaps one day finding love again with someone who would value honesty and loyalty as much as he did. For now, though, his path was clear. He would protect what was his and start anew, free from the shadows of betrayal that had clouded his life. He stood up from the bench, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Derek took one last look at the night sky, the stars still shining brightly above. As he turned to make his way home, he knew that, despite the challenges ahead, he was ready to rebuild and forge a new future, one grounded in truth, strength, and resilience. The road would be long, but Derek was ready to walk it, step by step, leaving the past behind as he embraced the promise of a new beginning. The following morning dawned with a muted gray sky, the sun struggling to break through the clouds as if mirroring the turmoil in Helen's mind. She sat at the kitchen table in Harry's small apartment, her phone clutched tightly in her hand, anxiety knotting her stomach. Derek's text from the night before had been curt and final, leaving no room for the discussion she so desperately needed. She needed to act quickly, to salvage the plans she and Harry had carefully crafted. Helen knew she couldn't simply let go of everything she had envisioned, a life of freedom and financial security, free from the constraints of her marriage. But Derek's sudden awareness of their scheme was a wrench in her plans, one that required swift and cunning action. Taking a deep breath, Helen dialed Derek's number, rehearsing her lines in her mind. She needed to sound sincere, to convince him that their marriage was worth saving. As the phone rang, she steeled herself for the confrontation. "Derek, please, can we talk?" she pleaded as soon as he answered, her voice carefully modulated to convey just the right amount of desperation and remorse. "I know you're angry, but we need to discuss this. There's so much you don't understand." Derek's voice was icy and unyielding, a stark contrast to the warmth it once held. "There's nothing to discuss, Helen. We'll handle this through our lawyers." Helen gripped the phone tighter, her mind racing. "Please, Derek. Just one meeting. I promise I'll explain everything. We can work through this." His response was a wall of silence, a barrier she couldn't penetrate. Helen felt a flicker of panic as she realized Derek wasn't going to budge. She ended the call, her mind already turning to Plan B. Helen knew she needed to enlist Harry's help to sway Derek, to use the bond between the brothers as leverage. "Helen," Harry greeted, his voice strained, "what are we going to do?" Helen turned to him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of hesitation. "We need to fix this, Harry. We need Derek to reconsider. You're his brother. You can get through to him." Harry hesitated, torn between the loyalty he felt for his brother and the emotions that had entangled him with Helen. "I don't know if I can do that. He's hurt, Helen. Really hurt." "I know," Helen replied, her voice low and urgent. "But if we don't do something, we'll lose everything. We have to make him see that we're not trying to take everything from him. We just want a chance at happiness." Harry rubbed his forehead, conflicted. The weight of what he had done pressed heavily on him, a constant reminder of the betrayal he had committed against his own flesh and blood. He had always looked up to Derek, admired his strength and determination. Now, he was the cause of his brother's pain. "I never wanted to hurt Derek," Harry admitted, his voice cracking with emotion. "I just got caught up in everything. I thought we could have a fresh start." Helen reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. "We can, Harry. We just need to get Derek to calm down and see things from our perspective. You can talk to him, make him understand that we didn't mean for it to get this far." Harry looked into Helen's eyes, seeing the desperation and determination that mirrored his own. He nodded slowly, the decision settling over him like a heavy cloak. He would try to talk to Derek, try to explain that their intentions weren't entirely malicious. Harry had never been one to manipulate or deceive, yet here he was, caught in a web of his own making. He knew he had to face Derek, to confront the consequences of his actions, and hope for some form of forgiveness. Helen needed to think strategically to turn this situation to her advantage. The stakes were high, and failure wasn't an option. Helen paced the living room, her mind a flurry of schemes and scenarios. She knew she had to be careful, to play her cards right. If she could get Harry to sway Derek, even slightly, it might be enough to salvage what was left of their plan. As she contemplated her next move, Helen felt a sense of resolve harden within her. She was determined to fight for the life she wanted, no matter the cost. She would do whatever it took to ensure her future was secure, even if it meant manipulating those closest to her. With renewed determination, Helen began to strategize, her mind focused on the path ahead. The plot was far from over, and she was ready to see it through to the end. Derek sat at his dining table, papers scattered before him like pieces of a puzzle he was determined to solve. But Derek felt a newfound sense of resolve, a burning determination to reclaim his life from the ashes of betrayal. His plan was simple yet calculated, born from the need to protect himself and ensure Helen and Harry faced the consequences of their actions. He was done playing the role of the victim. Now it was time for him to take control. The first step was to gather evidence. Derek had spent the previous night combing through old emails, text messages, and bank statements, looking for anything that would confirm the affair and their plot to take everything he owned. It was a painstaking process, but one he tackled with meticulous care. As he sorted through the evidence, Derek couldn't help but feel a mix of anger and betrayal. Each piece of evidence was like a dagger, cutting deeper into the wounds Helen and Harry had inflicted. But it also fueled his determination, driving him to ensure they would never hurt him again. His phone buzzed on the table, a reminder of the legal appointments he had set for the day. Derek had already contacted his lawyer, a sharp and seasoned professional known for her tenacity. Together, they crafted a strategy to protect his assets and ensure that Helen and Harry would walk away with nothing. Derek made a mental checklist: separate his finances, update the ownership documents for his business, and make sure the house stayed in his name. He knew he had to act swiftly to secure everything before Helen could make any more moves. The next part of his plan was more personal, more public. Derek knew he needed to share his story, to expose the betrayal for what it was. He wanted the world to see the truth, to understand the depth of deception he had endured. He started with his friends and family, reaching out to those he trusted. Derek sat down with them, face to face, and recounted the story, holding nothing back. The shock and anger on their faces mirrored his own feelings, and he felt a sense of solidarity as they rallied around him. "You did the right thing, Derek," his sister, Kate, said, her voice full of support. "We're here for you. Whatever you need, we'll help you." Buoyed by their encouragement, Derek turned to social media. It was a tool he hadn't fully appreciated until now, but one he realized could be powerful in revealing the truth. He crafted a carefully worded post, one that laid out the facts without descending into pettiness. "As many of you know, my life has recently taken a turn I never expected," he began, the words flowing with purpose. "I've discovered that my wife and my brother have been conspiring against me, planning to take everything I've worked for. This betrayal has been painful, but I'm determined to move forward with strength and integrity." He included screenshots of the messages he had found, ensuring the evidence spoke for itself. As he hit post, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The truth was out there, and he was no longer carrying the burden alone. The response was overwhelming. Messages of support flooded in from friends, colleagues, and even acquaintances he hadn't spoken to in years. Derek was surprised by the sheer volume of people who reached out, offering words of encouragement and solidarity. In the days that followed, Derek focused on the legal battle ahead. His lawyer moved swiftly, filing for divorce and ensuring that his assets were protected. The legal system churned slowly, but Derek was patient, knowing that each step brought him closer to the resolution he needed. Amidst the chaos, Derek found moments of clarity. He reflected on the person he wanted to become, the person he would be after the dust settled. This experience had been a crucible, one that forged a new understanding of himself and what he valued most. As the weeks passed, the evidence of Helen and Harry's betrayal became undeniable, even to those who had initially doubted Derek's story. The public exposure had done its work, leaving Helen and Harry with little room to maneuver. Derek found himself embracing the support of his community, the relationships that had become a lifeline in the storm. He discovered a resilience he hadn't known he possessed, a strength that came from facing adversity head-on. In the end, Derek emerged not only with his assets intact, but with a renewed sense of self. He had turned the tables on those who sought to destroy him, reclaiming his life and charting a new course forward. It was a victory born from pain, but one that promised a brighter future, a future built on truth, loyalty, and unwavering resolve. With the divorce finalized and the dust settling, Derek found himself standing at the edge of a new chapter in his life. It was a strange feeling, one that was equal parts liberating and daunting. For the first time in years, the future felt like a blank canvas, waiting for him to paint his own path. The months that followed the upheaval were marked by a transformation Derek hadn't anticipated. He started by reconnecting with old friends and making new ones, surrounding himself with people who brought positivity and support. His sister, Kate, was a constant presence, offering encouragement and reminding him that he was never alone. "Derek, you're stronger than you know," Kate said one evening as they sat on his back porch, the summer air warm and fragrant with the scent of blooming flowers. "You've been through hell and back, but you've come out the other side better for it." Derek nodded, taking in her words. "I think I'm finally starting to believe that," he replied, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "It's strange, you know? I thought this whole thing would break me, but I feel lighter." As the days passed, Derek began exploring hobbies and interests that had long been buried beneath the weight of his previous life. In the epilogue of his journey, Derek had found peace. He knew that Helen and Harry were living with the fallout of their actions, the consequences of their choices echoing through their lives. He bore them no ill will. Instead, he hoped they had learned something from the experience as well. Derek's life had been forever changed, but he embraced the change with open arms. He was free to forge his own path, to live authentically and without fear. The betrayal had been a catalyst, propelling him into a future that was brighter and more fulfilling than he had ever imagined. As he stood there, looking out at the world with renewed hope, Derek whispered to himself, "Here's to new beginnings." It was a toast to the journey he had taken, the lessons he had learned, and the life he was ready to live. A life filled with possibility, passion, and the unwavering belief in the power of starting over.